Have you seen any videos on shifting your identity that didn't just repeat the same old advice over and over? Stuff like positive affirmations, journaling, healing your inner child, discipline, or some ridiculous Sigma grind set? Well, this is not one of those videos. I'm going to show you how to start actually shifting your identity using neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Most men are not living a life they designed. They're playing a character in a movie they didn't write. I know this because I played the role perfectly for 15 years. I was the high achiever. I was the VP. I was the agency owner with the seven-figure exit. I hit every mark on the script. But when the curtain came down and I sold the company, I didn't know who I was anymore. I had built a massive resume, but I hadn't built a man. You're watching this because you feel a gap between the results you have and the way you feel. You try to bridge that gap with discipline. You read Atomic Habits and books like that. You wake up at 4 a.m., you grind harder, but it never sticks. You always snap back to the old baseline. I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to show you how to fix it using NLP. The problem is that you're trying to solve an identity problem at the level of behavior. In NLP, we look at a hierarchy called the logical levels of change. Picture a pyramid, and at the bottom, you're going to have environment, and then after environment, you're going to have behaviors, and then above that is capabilities, and then beliefs and values, and then identity. And then in some of these, after identity, there's like spiritual connection, but it just depends on which model you're looking at. So for the purpose of this, we'll just stop at identity. And for me, identity is also tied into spiritual purpose anyway. So at the bottom, you have the environment. So this is where you work, where you live. Most men try to change this first. So they'll move to cities or change jobs. They think that this is going to fix the way they feel, but it never does. Above that is behavior, what you do. This is where 99% of self-help lives. Do more, grind harder, wake up earlier. This is all the brute force and willpower, but it always runs out. And then after that is going to be the capabilities. So this is your skills. So I got like an MBA. I learned how to trade. I learned marketing. I learned a bunch of different things. I learned about leadership. I read books about management. I tried to improve my capabilities. But the skills, they just don't fix fulfillment. This is where the wall is, because above capabilities goes to the beliefs and values. And the thing is, at the very top is going to be identity after beliefs and values. But all that stuff is going to be the most important. And your identity is basically like the thermostat. And then from there, your behaviors are kind of the temperature, if you will. So you can use willpower to crank up the heat for a few weeks, but if your identity is set to 70 degrees, eventually the furnace is going to shut off. You're going to cool down back to match your identity. And that's just the way it works. This is why you self-sabotage. You aren't broken. Your thermostat is just doing its job. It's regulating you back to the person you believe you are. So how do we change the setting on the thermostat? We don't do it by faking it. And we don't do it by standing in the mirror and lying to ourselves with affirmations. We do it by auditing our evidence. Right now, you have a belief that you are a certain type of man. Maybe you believe you're a grinder who has to suffer to make money. Maybe you believe you're not a relationship guy. You believe that because you've stacked up evidence to prove it. At one point in my life, I used to call myself the grind father, and it was like a joke because I would work so hard at my job, and it became part of my identity, and I thought that that's just like how I had to be, and I like took pride in it and all that. But it really was detrimental. It wasn't even effective, and it wasn't really like an identity that I really wanted, to be honest with you. So here's the trick. You have evidence of the opposite as well. You just filed it in the wrong folder. So when I was transitioning from a stressed out CEO to a calm leader, I didn't have to reinvent a new person. I just had to look at my past and find the reference experiences where I had already been that man. There were moments where I was calm in a crisis. There were moments where I prioritized my peace over profit. But my old identity had labeled those moments as flukes. I'd filed them under luck. To shift your identity, you have to go back into the archives. You have to find the evidence that you are already the man you want to be. And you have to relabel it as character. You say, that wasn't luck, that was me. When you start stacking those reference experiences, you build a new leg for the table to stand on. You stop trying to do the habits of a successful man, and you start being the man who naturally has those habits. The shift doesn't happen when you change what you do. The shift happens when you change who you think you are. When I stopped identifying as a guy who grinds for success and started identifying as an architect of freedom, everything changed. The seven-figure exit didn't bring me peace. Rewiring my identity brought me peace. If you're tired of acting out a script you didn't write, and you're ready to design your own life, you need to inspect the foundation you're building on. I have a free school community called Man Rewired. Inside, I have a free training called the Foundation Inspection. It walks you through this and helps you find where you're misaligned. Are you trying to fix an identity problem with a behavioral solution? Go to the link in the description, join the free community, and download the inspection. Stop playing the character, start writing the script.